In the gospel, Jesus said that he laid down his life for his friends. And in the letter to 1 John, which we read just a moment ago, it says this: we know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's good and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses help? Usually when we hear the phrase, laying down our lives for our friends, what we imagine is someone who lays down their whole life all at once. We think of heroes, like people in uniform and others who serve. We think of police officers. And we know some, and we have heard about others who have laid down their life in the line of duty while trying to serve and protect. Heroes who lay down their lives for others. We think of firemen. And we know, or we've heard about some firemen who died in the line of duty while trying to serve and protect others. I remember the faces and the names of firemen that gave their lives trying to rescue people from the Twin Towers on 9/11. Heroes. We think of those in the military, and we know some and have heard of others who have died in the line of duty while trying to serve and protect their country or their squad. Laying down our lives for our friends. And we think of first responders. We know some, and we've heard of others. In responders who were infected by COVID-19 while trying to care for others. And we've heard of some who have died because they were committed enough to show up trying to serve and protect other people. No greater love is this than someone lay down their life for their friends. And we think of school teachers. And we know some or have heard of others, school teachers who tried to shield with their own bodies their students from an active shooter. And some school teachers were killed, laying down their lives for their students, laying down their whole life all at once. But more often, laying down our lives for our friends does not mean laying down our whole lives all at once. More often, what laying down our lives for our friends means is laying down some aspect of our life, some part of our life, something that's ours that we might want, but letting go of it, giving it to others, which is exactly why John wrote in 1 John, how does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses help? I was living on the Florida Keys in the early 60s during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And if you'll remember, at that time, there were boatloads of Cubans desperately trying to escape the horrors of those initial times under Castro, when there wasn't enough food, when there weren't opportunities. And they would crowd together in little boats, and they would try to cross those 90 miles from Havana to the Florida Keys, sometimes dying, sometimes being rescued. And I remember that there were 2 squads of Coast Guard troops with 2 cutters, both in the same marina where my dad and I ran our charter boat out every day to fish. And they would go out with their 50 caliber machine gun that I so desperately wanted to shoot sometime. That 50 caliber machine gun on the bow of their boat. And they would go out and meet a raft, too overcrowded with people for safety. And they would tow that raft back to the marina. And there were some people in the marina that were angry about our rescuing Cubans in despair. Send them back to Havana, they would say. One of those Cubans, a boy by the name of Reynaldo Garcia Martinez, one of those Cubans ended up going to the same school that I attended. And Reynaldo and I became friends. He and I were in the same class. This boy that people wanted to send back after his parents had risked his life to rescue him. And they imagined how the Cubans would start to take over some of our economy in the Miami area. And they did. Today, if you live in Miami and you walk into a convenience store or a gas station or any number of shops, you will find a Cuban behind the counter who can speak to you in English, or you can speak to them in Spanish, if you will. Laying down our lives didn't mean necessarily dying, laying down our whole life all at once. It meant giving up the imagination that the only people here in the Miami area would be not people from Latin America, but people from Europe. We had to give up that idea that only people like us and only those who spoke English had a right to live and to pursue happiness here on this continent. And Reynaldo Garcia Martinez was not like me. We went to the same grade. We were in the same class. But he did not know English profanity. So as a fifth grader, I taught Reynaldo Garcia Martinez profane language and dirty jokes in English. And he returned the favor. He taught me profanity and dirty jokes in Spanish. And now today, it's been so long since I've spoken Spanish, I cannot communicate to anyone in the Spanish world anywhere, except certain phrases that I still remember learning when I was in fifth grade. Most often, laying down our lives for our friends does not mean laying them down all at once, our whole life all at once. It means giving hospitality to, giving friendship to others, even if the other stands in the way of something I might want. Most of us are never going to be called to be heroes laying down our lives all at once in the way that a policeman does, in the way that a fireman does, in the way that a military person does, in the way that first responders are doing, in the way a school teacher does at the time of an active shooter. But every day, we meet someone who desperately needs something. And we're asked the question, are we, like Jesus, going to abide in the love of the Father and lay down some aspect of our life for the other? I desperately wish sometime when I'm down in South Florida, somewhere in the Miami area, that I would come across a man my age. either gray or bald, unrecognizable to me, but that when he took my credit card to purchase something in a store, he might look at that and he might say, with a Cuban accent, I remember a boy by that name when I was in 5th grade who taught me English profanity and English dirty jokes. I wonder whatever happened to him. Wouldn't it be marvelous to run into him today and to remember the friendship that we had when we were boys and when there were people around in our community who desperately wanted to send him back in a small boat? Each of us is called every day to give a little bit of ourselves to others, to lay down our life for our friends. One of my favorite rabbis is Harold Kushner. You might have read his book, because when Rabbi Harold Kushner was struggling with his child, his boy Aaron, Aaron was born prematurely, and he had premature aging progeria. And after Aaron died, Rabbi Kushner wrote the book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Book I read and have found very profitable. But Rabbi Kushner told another story which has affected me even more profoundly. Rabbi Kushner says, once there was this mother who sent her 12-year-old son out on an errand, and he was slow in coming home. And after a while, he finally gets back, and his mother asked, "What took you so long? I was worried about you." And the boy said, "Oh, there was this little boy down the street. His tricycle broke, and he was crying because he couldn't fix it. And I really felt bad, so I had to stop and help." And the boy's mother said, What? Are you trying to tell me that you know how to fix a tricycle and you sat there to help this boy and fix the tricycle?" And her son replied, "No, Mom, I don't know how to fix a tricycle. I sat down and I helped him cry." The love of God became flesh and lived among us. And the love of God was demonstrated through the life of Christ for the leper, for the prisoner, for the poor, for the occupying soldiers of the Roman Empire, for disciples who betrayed him and disciples who abandoned him, and for everyone who was lost or in trouble. The love of God was poured out into Christ, and from Christ to the people that he encountered. And then the Romans killed him. But the love of God is stronger than the power of death. And in this Easter season, we celebrate how love raised Christ from the dead, who continued to touch those he knew and showed his love to his friends. And he says to us, if the love of God is going to live in you, it will live in you if and only if you can lay down your life in some way, probably not all at once, but in some small way for the need of others, even if it's just to help them cry. The ancient Greeks described friendship in several ways, and this leaked its way into the New Testament. You've got friends who are useful friends, connections, business associates. Change jobs, move away, you'll probably never think of them again. And then you've got social friends, people that you enjoy being with. Lots of fun, but that's also contextual. You might enjoy watching the football game some afternoon with them. You might enjoy going to a picnic with them. You might enjoy going to church with them. But they're just social friends. And then you've got deep friendship, soul friends, friends that you can go anywhere with, friends that you can be away from for a long, long time and then pick up again as if it were only yesterday. Friends that by loving you, teach you how to love. Friends who are really close and about whom you really care. In his book, Toxic Charity, Robert Lipton says that just trying to meet other people's needs without developing friendship, without developing relationship, often leads to a lack of understanding and to poor results. If our goal is to lay down our life for our friends, before we get around to laying out our life, first we need to develop friends, relationships, soul friends, people we can partner with. And that means sometimes becoming friends with people that you see every day, and yet you're not deep with. Some of those are in your families. Some of those are your neighbors. Some of those you go to church with. But God characterizes what our life is about, why we are born, by showing us that Jesus became deep friends, even with people that would deny him, mess up the whole process, betray him, run for their lives. He became friends with them, laid down his life for them. And no one has greater life than this, that you lay down your life, sometimes all at once, but mostly just a little bit at a time. If we seek to follow Christ, we will do that. We will walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.